What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the Touchline Talk channel. Premier League season done. Manchester City champions, fourth consecutive season. First time any team has done that in England's top flight. Arsenal eventually get the job done against Everton, but it is not enough. Phil Foden scores twice early. Mohamed Kudus scores a bicycle kick to make things interesting right before halftime. And Rodri scores yet another really, really important goal for Manchester City. And they take care of business in the second half and win another Premier League title. I do want to talk some Arsenal and where this goes moving forward. But, of course, got to start with Manchester City. I'm not going to talk about the FFP charges. That does not apply to this team. That is something from the past. Of course, it relates to Manchester City and the overall conversation. I'm just not interested in having that conversation today. Once a ruling is made, then that's the time to have that conversation. I don't want to lump in with what is happening on the field. So, not talking about that today. Just wanted to throw that out there first. Where I do want to start is by reinforcing a simple point that I do think gets lost sometimes. Manchester City's success is not just about the money. And if it was just about the money, Chelsea would not have had to rally this season to finish sixth, 28 points behind Manchester City, and Manchester United would not have finished eighth. It is the combination of the money, the manager, and the recruitment strategy, because outside of Calvin Phillips, who has Manchester City missed on? Even Jack Grealish, who has not lived up to his price tag, who didn't have a huge role this season, was one of their best players for a season. It is that combination of they spend the money really well, and these players are brilliant. They don't have flops. And they have the ability to go buy just about any player in the world that they want. But it is both of those things. Because if it was so easy to just use money to build a team that is this good, that can go win 4 straight Premier League titles, then my goodness, Todd Bowley's Chelsea would have come at least close with the billion plus on top of the squad that they already had when he bought the team. The structure, the setup, the organization matters, the manager matters. That is, in the most basic sense, Manchester City's brilliance. It is a brilliant manager inside a brilliant infrastructure that knows how to identify brilliant players who then perform brilliantly. It is all of those things. That's what makes them so hard to beat, because nobody else, at least in England and I would argue in the world, has all of those boxes checked the way Manchester City does. The second thing. I still push back on this inevitable idea. And here's why. People are competing with Manchester City. The Athletic put together some really interesting numbers, and I encourage you to go read that story. I don't remember what the headline was, but it's talking about kind of the way that the bar has been raised in the Premier League in terms of what you have to do to win the title because of what happened Manchester City had become. Manchester City, in the Premier League era, have 2 of the top 5 point totals and 3 of the top 8. 2 of 5 and 3 of 8. Of those 3, only one of them has come in this 4-year stretch where they have won 4 consecutive titles. And I have been saying this and saying this and saying this, and that is the numbers to actually back it up. We have got to separate Manchester City teams and Manchester City eras within the Pep Guardiola era. And since Manchester City became Manchester City, going back to, the first titles before Pep got there. They are not producing 98, 99, 100-point seasons. There was a point in which they were doing so, and they did not sustain that over an extended period of time. These 4 title races were decided by 12 points. That was the Manchester United season when nobody was close. 1 point, 5 points, and 2 points. The last 3 have been decided by a total of 8 points. And yes, Manchester City came out on the right side of all 3 of them. And yes, it helps when Manchester City enters the final day of the regular season, first in the table, knowing all they have to do is win. And yes, you will remember the 2-0 to 3-2 against Villa. This one got dicey for a second because all of a sudden, basically instantaneously, West Ham got within a goal, Arsenal got an equalizer, and so now 2 moments and Arsenal are winning the Premier League. So there wasn't as much jeopardy, and then, Rodri gets the goal. That pretty much seals it. Looked for a second like West Ham might have pulled one back late, but gets chopped off by VAR. My point simply is, this is not easy. I don't care how many times Manchester City does it. And there are teams capable of competing with them and pushing them. And we don't really talk about the fact that there's a lot of pressure when you are expected to win every single season. And then you have to deliver for 38 games. City do deserve credit for that. And yeah, you can talk about obviously, they've got massive advantages and they should win the Premier League every single season. But that's just not how sports work. How many teams actually do what they're supposed to every single season? City are probably the closest. And yes, it's beneficial that it is a 38-game season where all of their advantages get to be maximized, as opposed to a tournament where one weird thing happens and you can get eliminated. But you do have to acknowledge all of the sustained excellence that exists here. And they are not unreachable because they are not the same team that had a 100-point season. They had to claw from behind last season. They had to do it again this season. And they did. Last season they had a lot more time because Arsenal fell apart. This season it got to a point where they they needed to win out. And they did. You don't have to be happy about it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to like how they're built, where this money is coming from, the fact that the odds are stacked in their favor. But there are plenty of other teams where the odds are stacked in their favor too. Sometimes they don't, this season, they're not even finishing in Champions League spots. And City just won this league for a 4th consecutive season. It is a combination of the advantages and actually knowing what to do with them and being a competent organization that makes really good decisions and allows all of these brilliant players to perform at their best. On the Arsenal side, first, this has to be about more than trying to win a title. because you are chasing a behemoth. This juggernaut that, as I said before, has every box checked. You cannot evaluate yourselves based on whether you beat Manchester City or not. It has to be about more than that. It has to be about the journey and about the process. And about what Arsenal was able to do to push Manchester City to the very end this season. Arsenal had 2 more wins and only 1 fewer points than the Invincibles. That is the only Arsenal team to collect more points than this one. Dating back to, I just checked FB reference, going back to 1904, 1905 is the first season they had listed. This is also Arsenal's best goal difference in a 38-game season. They were better than most of Arsenal's title teams. Basically better than every single one except for the Invincibles. And they still won more games. They just lost some. And obviously you have the aura of being unbeaten over a 38-game season. That stuff has to matter. Because if your evaluation, this has become a big thing for me and it's a good time to talk about it within the context of how Arsenal fans view this season. And anybody trying to go after Arsenal for not getting the job done. If you base your determination of success and the enjoyment you get out of supporting a team based on just generally whether they win a championship or not, but specifically in the Premier League, whether they win the league title with Manchester City there, you are just not going to find joy in that team. There has to be more meaning and more purpose to it than just did they lift the trophy at the end of the season. Think back to where Arsenal were when Mikel Arteta took over. Think about the times when people weren't sure Mikel Arteta was the guy. Think about when they threw away Champions League. And then they came back the next season, put together a phenomenal first half, and fell apart down the stretch. And then they came back, didn't quite reach the same heights, but they came awfully close in 2024, from January to May, but finished the job over 38 games and took Manchester City to the very end. Put together one of the best seasons in the history of the Premier League. Full stop. It didn't result in the title. Some of Liverpool's didn't either. And the big reason for that I keep harping on is the one thing that has literally been inevitable about Manchester City. If you give them the lead heading into the final game of the season where it is in their control, they've gotten the job done every single time. Arsenal, one game away, but could not give themselves the opportunity to be in control at heading into that final game. It was not a good performance against Everton, but they got the goal. Somewhat controversial, but they won. They got the winner in the second half. They completed the comeback. They came up just short. Of course, it's immensely disappointing because this team deserves to be a champion. But it's not the reality of the situation. So celebrate it for what it is. Because it's a phenomenal season. And something that 5 years ago, maybe even sooner than that, would any Arsenal fan have thought that they'd be in this position? That's got to mean something. That journey, that progress, the excellence that they displayed this season. Moving forward, the interesting part of this to me. There are 2 different ways to look at this if you're Mikel Arteta, if you're an Arsenal fan, if you're an Arsenal player, whoever. On one hand, just about everything went right, and it still wasn't enough. You have this phenomenal end to the season. You take Manchester City down to the final game. You actually get the results against Manchester City that you need. Manchester City does not have a particularly great season. Again, right? You don't have to go get 95, 98 points. There were a lot of things that needed to happen in order for Arsenal to contend for a title that happened this season. That's the negative way to look at it, is can you go replicate all of that again to put yourself in the same position? What if Manchester City end up with 96 points next season? What if Manchester City beat you home and away? Those kind of things. On the other hand, Arsenal proved they could do all of those things. That they could show up for 38 games, that they could win the head-to-head against Manchester City. Where they lost this title was the couple bad performances against mid-table teams, the draws, right? Things that were completely the home loss to Aston Villa. That's where this got decided. Is that against everybody else, Manchester City were so much better that it was able to make up for Arsenal's head-to-head success. That is something that is easily fixable. You just got to be better game to game. It's an incredibly high bar. That's the whole point. This is supposed to be hard as Manchester City. Right? But if they beat Aston Villa, they're champions. If they turn one of those draws into a win, they're champions. That's all that's standing between Arsenal and, if you get another 90, 91 point season, being able to finish the job next time. So which one of those is it going to be? Can Arsenal go at least win against City at home and make sure they don't drop any points in the head-to-head matchups next season? Can they be a little bit better just game to game, as good as they were this season? Or are they still going to be really good next season because they're a great team, but things don't go great in the head-to-head? They don't find a way to sort of make up ground against everybody else. City's that much, just a little bit better, and so now all of a sudden you got to be 5 points better than you were this season. That's where I'm really interested in this moving forward. Because if I'm Mikel Arteta, that's the message to my team. Look, it's incredibly disappointing, and you need to be incredibly proud of what you've done. When we show up next season, our mentality is this was within our control. We just have to do a little bit better on our end. We proved that we can do everything we need to give ourselves an opportunity to put ourselves in the race. We just got to finish the job next time. That's where I'm taking this if I'm Arteta. A couple other things real quick with the end of the Premier League season that I wanted to talk about real fast. Crystal Palace obliterated Aston Villa, as they seemingly are doing with everybody right now. Oliver Glasner is going to stay for obvious reasons. They are not about to let him leave. And if I'm Crystal Palace, I am doing everything I can to keep this team together. And my selling point is a pretty simple one. Let's just, for the sake of the conversation, assume Manchester City is not getting involved with Eze and Michael Olise. Because those are kind of the two guys. You're hearing a lot of Manchester United, some Spurs, some Chelsea. Let's just say it's those three teams. I'm going to Eberechi Eze and Michael Olise and saying, look, the teams that are interested in you, that are offering the kind of money that we'll consider accepting, are playing in the Europa League, or in Manchester United's case, potentially not playing in Europe at all. We are out here looking like a top 5 team in the Premier League. your chances of getting to the highest level of competition are better here, keeping this together, at least in the short term, for another season or two, than they are going to United or going to Spurs. Chelsea is an interesting one, but I would still argue also going to Chelsea. You have no reason to believe those teams are going to take another. I mean, now, Chelsea is an interesting conversation because of the way that they finished the season. But you look at where those teams are and where Crystal Palace is right now. Which one of them seems most likely to continue that into next season and to take another step forward? To me, it is obviously Crystal Palace. Glasner hasn't even had a time to really figure out what he wants to do. He just showed up, said, go play, instead of trying to be super conservative, and they're scoring goals all over the place. I think there's a really, really compelling argument, not permanently, not for the next 5 years, but for the next season or two, that the best thing for Eberechi Eze and Michael Olise is to stay. I am very curious to see how much they are willing to entertain that possibility, because this has got to be a blast. And you are putting yourself in a position to go win a trophy potentially next season and to certainly qualify for Europe and make a run at the Champions League. That's how they are a Champions League caliber team right now. Can they do it for 38 games? Who knows? If they get injured, that's where things fall apart because they're almost unbeatable with both of them on the field. But to me, it's a very compelling argument unless a Manchester City, an Arsenal, a Liverpool gets involved where you know you're going to the Champions League already, you know the aspirations are to compete for a Premier League title. But if it's that second tier of the other big six clubs who are trying to find a way to finish fourth, why not do it at Crystal Palace? They look better than any of them anyway. And then also, one more time, just to point this out, Everton finished, if you take away the points deductions, Everton finished with the same number of points as Brighton and Bournemouth. 12th in the league on goal difference, if you add those points back in. Sean Dyche did a remarkable job. Nobody looks at that team and says that is you got Ashley Young and Seamus Coleman playing as fullbacks. Nobody looks at that team and says, yeah, that's the 12th best team in the Premier League. But they nearly spoiled the party for Arsenal. They have been excellent lately. I don't know what else this guy has to do. Is he the one to take them back to where they want to be and trying to crack, not only the top half of the table, but that Europe conversation? Maybe not. But he is getting them to dramatically overachieve. I don't know what else you're supposed to ask for in a coach. That is the definition of good coaching. I talk about that all the time. So, there we go. Almost 25 minutes of reaction, but another Premier League season in the books. Thank you so much for following along during it and for tuning into this video. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.